It has been 7 years and 5 months since the Nintendo Switch was released on March 3rd, 2017. And it's finally about that time that we're coming to the end of the console's lifespan. And I think it's about time too, because I don't know if y'all saw this, but it was reported in some articles in July that Nintendo Switch is now the longest running Nintendo console without any replacement. So as we get closer to the end of the Switch's lifespan, I thought it'd be nice to go back and reflect on the Switch as a whole. Basically just to talk about the pros and the incredible software that released on this console, but then also discuss the cons and what I hope Nintendo can add or improve upon with its successor. So the biggest thing that came out of this generation, and the biggest pro in my opinion, is just the sheer amount of innovation we saw with Nintendo's IPs in general. I think the first one that everybody thinks of is probably Zelda. The way that it was able to transition from what we kind of knew in the past as semi-open world, usually still having a general linear structure that you have to follow, but in an open setting where you can go and do certain side quests if you want, or pursue the main quest. But it was typically kind of always on rails. And we've seen how Zelda has pretty much innovated in these last few years through Breath of the Wild, through Tears of the Kingdom, and just seeing how open-ended these worlds are. How you can travel anywhere you basically see. It's the Skyrim meme, but actually realized. And all of the mechanics they brought to the table in that game just completely changed the way you interact with the world and got you thinking about what different ways you could use your powers to knock out certain enemies, or what kind of machines could you make. It just brought so much more strategy and experimentation to the formula that I think was really needed. And there is still a space for a traditional Zelda like Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, of course. I really love those kind of more compact, more narrative-heavy Zelda experiences, but there was just something about these new Zelda games that really resonated well with a lot of people, brought in a ton of new Zelda fans also, and really just pushed the series to the next level. Another IP I can think of is Kirby, actually, with Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This was, believe it or not, the first time that Kirby actually fully transitioned into 3D. If you don't count games like Kirby Air Ride and some of the little eShop games that have come out over the years. And HAL Laboratory did a really good job at bringing Kirby to the next level. Bringing all of the power-ups you know and love from before, and building these nice little linear levels that kind of remind me of Super Mario 3D World, but bringing all of that charm and character that you know from the Kirby series. I think it was a way to finally inject some new life into this series that has been sorely needed for a while. I love the Kirby games on the 3DS, and Kirby Star Allies was okay, but when we finally got to Forgotten Land, it felt like this is kind of the vision that HAL has had for Kirby for a while, and I'm glad to see it fully realized. And also, this is when Kirby turned into a car. Carby. Gamers out here playing Call of Duty 52, I'm like, that's cool, but have you played Carby? Another super ambitious game was Super Mario Odyssey. It finally brought a return to form back to the original days of the Mario formula, back when they were more open-ended and it was all about collecting the power stars. I think Odyssey did a great job at just making like a really fun moveset to play around with, especially with Cappy. And they give you so many different varied, colorful worlds, each with their own themes, and even just an entire world modeled after New York, which of course threw everybody off in the reveal. 3D World was okay, but it did feel kind of safe. It was pretty linear. It had some great level design. It was a fun game, don't get me wrong, and they did port it to Switch, thankfully. But it feels like the developers listened to the fans and heard that they really wanted a return to form back to more open world exploration in Mario games, and I just had so much fun with that game. Also just in the photo mode too. I don't know why, but I'm obsessed with photo modes. And I really love being able to get just these extremely dumb or extremely cinematic photos and videos. You'll probably see some of them as we go throughout this video. They're just some of my favorites. Just to list one more off, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It contains every character from the past Smash games, every single level, and with the DLC, it gave us even more than we ever imagined, and it gave us characters that we honestly never expected to even see in Smash. I mean, we got Sora by the end of this, we got Minecraft Steve, we got Sans Undertale. Like, if you told me this was the roster we were going to get like a decade ago, I would think you were tripping. I would think you were talking about a fan game like Super Smash Flash, Project M, or something obscure like that. This was an amazing time. Like, Nintendo really listen to their fans here. In fact, Nintendo kind of listened to their fans across all of their IPs. I'll list one more off, Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing New Horizons did super well for the system. I think it's the second highest sold game on the system. And we all know it's because Nintendo fabricated the pandemic just to sell more copies, but you gotta do what you gotta do. My sister and I, we played so much Animal Crossing during the pandemic. We probably both have hundreds of hours logged in, at least I do. And I put way too much time into my town, dude. With the terraforming tools that they give you, with all the options to now put your furniture and place it around outside, I kind of went wild because this was the most amount of freedom that Animal Crossing has ever provided you when it comes to making your town. Yes, there's some complaints people have about maybe the villagers not having enough sass or spunk when they talk to you like they did in the original games. There's certain complaints about how you can only craft one item at a time. That stuff I get. That's kind of bogus, but dude, we had so much fun with that game. And once again, it's just another example of Nintendo really making this the console generation to continuously surprise everybody with the scale and ambition and innovation that they just poured into every single one of their existing IPs, man. And thankfully, Nintendo also brought a bunch of their best Wii U games over to the Switch because, let's be honest, I think the only people that actually bought the Wii U were me, and Scott the Woz bought all the rest of them. Scott here! So I was really happy that people now finally had the opportunity to play all of these great games. And since the Wii U gamepad didn't have much exclusive functionality with those games, they were fairly easy to be able to port to the Switch. And I mean, funny enough, the highest sold Switch game is a Wii U port. It's Mario Kart 8, but just the deluxe version. They added a couple of new characters, an actual battle mode, and they eventually started a DLC like years after, which basically expanded upon the entire game with 32 new courses. And it's unfortunate we didn't get a new Mario Kart this year, but I think that's just because Nintendo knew that they could do better by marketing Mario Kart on the Switch, and it just worked. I don't know how exactly that happened or what happened, but it's now at 63 million copies right now. And beyond Mario Kart 8, we also had some other ports like the Bayonetta series, Bayonetta 2. We had a port for Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, including the new Funky mode, which, as we all know, changed the entire game and won about 100 million Game of the Year awards just for Funky mode alone. And eventually we got a port of Super Mario 3D World with a new inclusion called Bowser's Fury, which I'm pretty sure is kind of Nintendo testing the waters to see if they can make Mario truly open world, because that's essentially what the game is. It's a bunch of bite-sized Mario levels, but in this giant playable map. And it really has me curious what Nintendo might be cooking for the Switch 2 for Mario. And of course, it wasn't all just Wii U ports. We actually had a lot of good revivals of Nintendo IPs we hadn't seen in a while. One of the first ones I think of is the Pikmin series, obviously. We hadn't seen a Pikmin game since, well, early on in 2013 with Pikmin 3, but we finally just got one pretty recently, and it's fantastic. It is super beginner friendly. You don't need to know anything about the first 3 Pikmin games to play this one. There's no like deep Pikmin lore. Well, there kind of is, but this game's fantastic if you've never played one before. Pikmin is essentially a light, real-time strategy game, I would say. It's from an over-the-shoulder perspective. You control these little guys who you can command and conquer to pick up treasures for your ship, attack certain enemies that you see out in the battlefield. But in this game, you also have this extremely overpowered dog named Ochi, who honestly, I believe kind of makes the game easy mode with the amounts of skills you can have him upgraded with later on in the game, but that's just me. But Pikmin 4, fantastic game, tons of content too. If you haven't played it, highly recommend it. We also had the return of certain Mario RPG games. Literally, we had Super Mario RPG from back in the Super Nintendo era get completely remade. I thought we would never see this. Actually see Geno come back to life. Insane. Remember when everybody wanted him in Smash and that never exactly happened?
Ah! Oh, Geno! Oh no!
But hey, this is the next best thing. It's just seeing the existence of Geno come back in this beautiful, fully realized remake with the same composer for the original game coming back to actually recompose the entire OST, and it's beautiful. And then pretty recently, a couple of months ago, we got a full-on remake for the Thousand Year Door out of nowhere, which actually gives me hope for the Paper Mario series, making me think that maybe Nintendo's actually listening for once and realizing that having every character be named Toad is not a good idea. And they pretty much kept everything that was great about the original intact while enhancing what was already there. Being able to easily swap out your party members without having to go to the main menu, having unique battle themes for every single world, and just adding a whole bunch of little quality of life updates here and there. It's really a fantastic way to finally experience this game, and now you don't have to go out to pay hundreds of dollars on eBay to play this anymore. Nintendo also remembered that Metroid exists, which is pretty cool. I recently got into Metroid during the Switch era and really enjoyed what I played. I got into Metroid Prime via the Prime hack on my computer, so playing with a mouse and keyboard. And it was around that time that Nintendo actually started to acknowledge Metroid again with Metroid Dread, a brand new 2D Metroid game, straight up. And then after that, we got a full-on remaster for Metroid Prime, which shockingly looks beautiful. Retro Studios did a really good job actually utilizing the tech here, and it runs at a full 60 and doesn't look bad at all. I'd say it's probably the best way to play this game now. 2D Zelda even got some love with a remake of Link's Awakening in this cool little glossy toy diorama looking style. And some people have mixed feelings about this look, but the game holds up really well. It plays well. I think it looks fantastic too. And then Mario Party even got a return to form with normal gameplay that involved walking with both of your feet instead of being trapped in a car. I'm not really sure why we had the car era of Mario Party, but I'm glad we've parked the car and now we're walking again, because that was a weird time. And they've also brought back a lot of the original minigames and maps from the previous versions. And yeah. Finally, I want to talk about a few of the peripherals that Nintendo made during this era, because there's a couple to mention. For one, we had Ring Fit Adventure, which was a game that was trying to, I think, capitalize on the Wii Fit era. And it's this game that came with this ring that you would slide your Joy-Con into, and you would use it to traverse obstacle courses and fight giant demon Mothman. I played some of this, but not too much, because I'm a gamer, and gamers don't like moving.
Here's my desk.
It was fun for what it was, but it's not going to be anything groundbreaking. We also saw Nintendo ponder the idea of, what if we got some RC cars and put some GoPros on them? And that was Mario Kart Live Home Circuit. It was this unique idea and kind of fun, but if anything, it kind of feels like it was made more for content creators and for streamers, especially because of how expensive it was. But this was a little toy you could basically buy to get a Mario and Luigi RC kart and set up a little Mario Kart track in real life to essentially kind of race around it. And it would use some type of AR technology to overlay the other racers and items in front of you, but it felt like it was kind of more of a beta product or whatnot, but it still led to some really funny online clips.
I wish I could hit like a ramp right now.
And then we had Nintendo Labo, which actually came out with a couple of kits, and it was probably the most expensive way to purchase cardboard in your life. But I remember it came out as 3 different kits. There was one for a piano that you could make. There was even one for a VR kit, kind of like Google Cardboard, if you remember that. I remember Nintendo even pushed out specific games to have a VR mode. So if you actually had this VR Nintendo Labo, you could use it in certain games and probably play a very interesting VR version of Breath of the Wild. I've never tried that. It sounds nauseating, but you only live once, so. To kind of wrap up the pro section of this video, Nintendo Switch had so many fantastic games, a wonderful library, and I'm sure a decade from now, when people start to have nostalgia for the Switch, they're going to look down at the system and just remember its massive library of so many fantastic games. And so next, let's discuss some of the cons on the Switch that I'm really hope are remedied or heavily improved upon for the Switch successor. So this first point may be more of a minor one, but where is the personality on Switch? The Switch is probably the most basic UI ever that's been on a Nintendo system. And I'm really surprised there's just not as many Easter eggs or theming or personalization just to really make your Switch feel like your own. Of course, you can get like custom cases and different Joy-Cons and whatnot to deck out the hardware, but I'm talking about the software. There was just never enough of that Nintendo charm this time around that we have seen in the Wii or the 3DS. But the biggest thing I want to point out here is, where were the themes for the Switch? It may not be that big of a deal, but I point it out because if you go into the settings menu and you scroll to the themes section, there's only 2 options. It's just black or white. And you see all of this empty space below it, and it just makes me think that there were originally plans to have some type of a storefront to buy themes on, or at least to download more, but there just never was. That's always just kind of been a curiosity for me, is like, were there meant to be themes? Where are the themes? Why don't we have any? And where is any of the personality on the Nintendo Switch? It was not here. Aside from like a couple of cute little sound effects and Easter eggs that you can make when you're unlocking the Switch, there's just not much else here. Anyway, that point's kind of minor. Now let's talk about the eShop. So maybe you guys have heard of a YouTuber named Beat'emups. A couple of weeks ago, he talks pretty extensively about how bad the eShop is on the Switch. So I'm just kind of paraphrasing what he's already said, but I still think this is worth mentioning. The eShop on the Switch is a huge downgrade from the Wii U and anything we've had before it. It is extremely laggy. It is so slow. You can see in this B-roll here, I'm trying to scroll to the very bottom of this page and it's just not keeping up. And even when I scroll back up, as you see right here, it's like it just forgot all of the images that I just scrolled past. I do not know what kind of web browser is using. It must be from the Stone Age, but this is ridiculous. I'm going through different tabs here and I'm trying to click and wait for different pages to load. And there was even a moment when I was searching up a title and it took up to like 20 seconds for this guy to load. And it doesn't matter how fast your internet speed is, you're just waiting for pages to load like you're on AOL dial-up. It's bad. And the discoverability features for even finding new games on the shop is equally bad. Let's say you're an up-and-coming indie game developer, right? And you're about to release your brand new game for the Switch. So there's a coming soon section where you can find the game there. You can go to the coming soon tab and you can find it there eventually, once you scroll past games like Anime Golf.
I play this for the golf.
And a game that is literally just a clock. And you may finally come across a game that you've been looking for.
Oh man, I love Run and Jump Guy.
But let's say, okay, the game's finally out and unfortunately, it doesn't do too well. It doesn't appear in the top charts. Maybe it's not on the featured page. Well then, sorry dude, you're kind of just straight out of luck. Unless you can somehow rally up a little marketing campaign to let people know, hey, we released this game on Switch. If it's not on either of those two tabs, your only saving grace at this point is that your marketing can be good enough to put the game back on the top charts or on the featured tab, or you just have to, as the consumer, go onto the search page and type up the game yourself. You're kind of just relying on people who already know about your game now to purchase your game, which at the end of the day, if you're just trying to discover new stuff, or if you're a content creator, you're going to have a much harder time figuring out what's actually out for the Switch if you're just on a store that's not even telling you. It's bad. Third thing I want to talk about is that there's not a certain area on the Switch where you can easily reach out and send text messages to your friends or start a voice chat or any of those type of features you would see on a PlayStation or Xbox console. Nintendo has designated a lot of that to their NSO mobile app, which is supposed to be the replacement for voice chat and messaging and whatnot. We're not using it, okay? We're using Discord. I just wonder why Nintendo didn't try to make some type of integration there with reaching out to your friends and easily being able to start some type of a voice chat call. It's just such a common feature to add in a console nowadays. I don't know why Nintendo was like this. There's gotta be some type of integration coming around for the next console. While we're talking about Nintendo Switch Online, let's just say it's a bad service. NSO is full of a bunch of servers that lag all the time, and it doesn't matter if you're even playing some simple 2D platformer like Mario Maker all the way up to Smash Bros. If you want a decent experience online with Switch games, you need an Ethernet adapter and you need to be plugged in wired to the Ethernet at all times. Ethernet should be an option on the new console from day one. And also, I really hope they just get overall better servers, because we are paying for this service now for essentially the same level of quality. And I don't know, man. I don't really know who's taking care of the servers over at Nintendo, but they need to step up their game. The last thing I'll say is that I really wish that Nintendo didn't push all of their classic games behind a subscription paywall. I think this is a fine idea. Like, if you're new to Nintendo's catalog of old retro games and you've never played any of these, I do think that a broad subscription model is a good idea, but it should be an option. It shouldn't be the only choice. I think what they should have done is allowed people who wanted to buy these games outright to do that for an appropriate price on the eShop itself, but if you just wanted to kind of play a handful of games and then be done with it, also have the subscription service as a choice. I think it's just another example of Nintendo being strange with their old games, especially since you could purchase them and download them on previous consoles like the Wii and the Wii U and even the 3DS. So I'm not sure why they decided like, oh, it's time to go back in the Nintendo vault now, you know, and slowly drip feed these games to us over the last 7 years. I mean, I thought we would be getting GameCube games by now, but I guess Nintendo thinks that they're still pretty valuable and they'd probably charge more for that. So. Despite the complaints I'm making here though, I think most people would still agree that the Switch is not just financially successful, but also just really popular and well received because of the sheer quality of the games that they released for it. From the ways they were able to innovate and raise the bar with so many of their well-known IPs, I think just goes to show how much love and how much work in general Nintendo put on the software side and on the gameplay just to really make memorable experiences for new players and returning players. And I'm very eager to see what Nintendo does next. Although we're not entirely out of the woods with the Nintendo Switch yet, we still have a couple of more games coming out for the rest of this year, including a new Mario and Luigi game, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Mario Party Jamboree, a remaster of Donkey Kong Country Returns, Metroid Prime 4, which it might be a dual release for the upcoming console. I think it might release on both the Switch 1 and 2, we'll have to see. And Pokemon ZA? Pokemon Zaza? And actually, at the time of recording this today, there was a Nintendo Direct. They released some extra games there, nothing mind-blowing though. We got Pizza Tower coming to the Switch. Fantastic game, by the way. Capcom also announced their Fighting Collection Volume 2. Maximilian Dude is probably having a heart attack right now.
In one collection, here's the complete roster of games. Capcom versus SNK.
But once those games are out the door, I think we're finally going to hear something about the Switch 2. It's about that time. Typically, whenever you see Nintendo start to release a bunch of remasters and re-releases of older games, that's when you can tell that all of their efforts are starting to be focused on the next console. And in the meantime, they're just trying to release something to entice people until they're ready for the next leap. So you can look back at the 3DS and pretty much see the same thing happening there. So overall, Switch did pretty good. Could have been better, but overall, really good console with incredible software. It's a console that shows that Nintendo learned their mistakes from the Wii U and really went full throttle with the Switch. In hindsight, the Wii U looks like the Switch in beta. It kind of felt like Nintendo was on the cusp of a hybrid console, but they weren't exactly sure how to get there at the time, and they had some cool ideas with the second screen, but it was never utilized that well. But I really think it's cool how Nintendo was able to kind of learn from their mistakes and still take various mechanics and gimmicks from the Wii U and put them into the Switch, but just in a format that makes sense. And it's a console that will definitely be talked about for a long while to come. And yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I just wanted to kind of dump all of my thoughts out about the Switch. If any of you guys have any opinions or thoughts or anything to add, drop it down in the comments section below. I'm super surprised that the algorithm actually worked and showed my last video to people. And I'm so grateful for anybody who subscribed. I'm really just doing this for fun and talking about gaming and tech that I really enjoy. The next video is actually going to be talking about a insanely huge and very complex game controller, and I'm going to be going into that in detail and hopefully getting the game working for it. So if you want to know what the heck I'm talking about, subscribe. I think that video is going to be very interesting. I'm going to go now. Smash the bell or tickle it, weirdo. How do I end a YouTube video?